The world was holding its breath. It wasn't every day that a tech mogul and space pioneer made a shocking revelation about Mars, but that's exactly what Elon Musk did during a live Q&A event that captured the attention of millions. His voice echoed through the airwaves, sharp and certain, and what he said next would change everything. Mars is not what we think it is, Musk began, his eyes narrowing as if he were about to share the deepest secret of the universe. There's a base on Mars. And it's not ours. The crowd gasped. Silence fell over the room, thick with disbelief. The live feed exploded with comments, viewers from around the globe asking, did he really just say that? Is this a joke? What is Musk hiding? And that was just the beginning. Musk leaned forward, staring directly into the camera, his face tight with seriousness. There's more, he continued. We've all been looking at Mars from the wrong angle. For years, we've assumed it's a barren wasteland, a red desert. But the truth is, Mars has a history we were never meant to uncover. I'm here to tell you now, we've barely scratched the surface. At this, the chat exploded. Speculation spread like wildfire. Was Musk just being cryptic? Or had he finally broken the silence about something humanity wasn't ready for? What do you mean by base, Elon? A voice in the crowd shouted. The camera zoomed in on Musk's face as he let the question linger for a moment. Then, with the weight of years of secrecy hanging in the air, he answered. There's an underground facility on Mars. It's older than anything we've ever built. And it's not a human creation. It's something else. At that moment, the world paused. Musk's words were a declaration, one that set the stage for a mystery that would consume not just scientists but conspiracy theorists, journalists, and ordinary people alike. What did Musk know that no one else did? How was this hidden knowledge linked to his SpaceX ambitions? And why had he waited until now to speak? To understand why Musk's announcement had such an impact, we had to first understand the man behind it. Elon Musk was no stranger to high expectations or radical ideas. Since founding SpaceX in 2002, his goal was simple yet audacious, to revolutionize space travel and make life multiplanetary. Musk was driven by a vision of humanity expanding beyond Earth and establishing colonies on Mars. Yet, despite his groundbreaking achievements in space exploration, Musk had always kept certain things close to his chest. For years, rumors had circulated about Musk's fascination with Mars. Some whispered that he wasn't just building rockets for profit but that he had an unrelenting obsession with the planet's potential. After all, Mars was the next frontier, the ultimate challenge, the kind of challenge that Musk thrived on. It wasn't enough to make history, Musk wanted to reshape the future. But this announcement about a hidden base was something entirely different. In the years leading up to the announcement, Musk had made a series of cryptic statements about Mars, bits and pieces of an elaborate puzzle no one had fully put together. He spoke of anomalies in Mars geology, odd radar readings from past missions, and whispers from unnamed sources. Each comment, each interview, had planted seeds of doubt, but this was different. He had never been so direct. People began to speculate. Was Musk finally revealing the existence of extraterrestrial life? Or was this just another wild claim designed to drive SpaceX's stock price up? Dr. Claire Bennett leaned back in her chair, her fingers tapping nervously on the desk in front of her. She had been a part of the space community for years, an expert in Martian geology and the potential for ancient life on the planet. As much as she respected Musk's innovations, she never thought he'd come out and say something like this. Not now, not like this. Her phone buzzed. A text message from an old colleague, did you hear? He's talking about the base. Are you in? Claire stared at the screen, torn. Her life's work had been centered on Mars, on uncovering its secrets. But a hidden base? A base that was somehow linked to someone like Musk? She wasn't sure if she could believe it, and yet, the possibility was too tantalizing to ignore. Claire had always kept a professional distance from Musk's public persona, but the more she thought about it, the more it seemed inevitable that she would have to engage with him. The Mars base wasn't just a curiosity, it was a game changer. If it was real, it could redefine everything humanity thought it knew about the planet. But there was one question that kept swirling in her mind: if this base really existed, who built it? The days that followed Musk's announcement were nothing short of chaotic. Headlines dominated the media: Elon Musk, Mars is hiding something bigger than we thought, is SpaceX hiding the truth about Mars, the secret Mars base, what's Musk not telling us? Scientists scrambled to offer their own interpretations. Some suggested that Musk had discovered a new underground feature on Mars, possibly an abandoned research station from previous missions. Others theorized it was a military base, perhaps built by Earth's nations in secret, with Musk somehow having access to its location. But it wasn't just the scientific community that reacted. Social media was flooded with wild theories, some suggesting alien involvement, others claiming that Musk had stumbled upon a massive cover-up orchestrated by world governments. Conspiracy theorists flourished in the wake of the announcement. If there was a base on Mars, they argued, it could only mean one thing: humanity was not alone in the universe. Through it all, Musk remained silent, refusing to clarify his statement. The silence only fueled the fire. People were desperate for answers, but Musk was playing a long game. As the world debated, Claire Bennett couldn't help but feel a pull, a need to be part of whatever was unfolding. She wasn't alone in this feeling. NASA and the European Space Agency both reached out to Musk's team for more details, hoping to gain insight into what he had discovered. Yet, for all the buzz, one thing was certain: no one had concrete answers. Claire watched the media spin their theories, some outrageous and some eerily plausible. But she knew one thing above all else: something was happening. Something big. And if she could get to the truth before the rest of the world, she might uncover a secret that would forever change the course of human history. As she sat in her office, her phone buzzed once again. This time, it wasn't a message. It was a calendar invitation: meeting with Musk. Tomorrow, 9 a.m. Be there. She swallowed hard. This was it. Tomorrow, she would finally confront Elon Musk and find out whether Mars really held the secrets he was teasing. The path ahead was unknown, but one thing was certain: this was only the beginning. Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. This story might just spark a new beginning. What's one thing that always pushes you forward, even when things get tough? The morning sun had barely broken through the clouds when Dr. Claire Bennett arrived at the SpaceX headquarters. The campus was quiet at this hour, the usual hustle and bustle of engineers, scientists, and tech experts still hours away from beginning their workday. But today was different. Today, she wasn't just another scientist. Today, she was about to enter the heart of the mystery that could reshape the future of humanity. Claire parked her car, stepping out onto the crisp pavement with a mixture of anticipation and skepticism. She had spent the last 24 hours wrestling with the implications of Elon Musk's announcement, the weight of his words still hanging over her like an unfinished puzzle. Could there really be a hidden base on Mars? And if so, who had built it? What was its purpose? Her phone buzzed again as she made her way toward the main building. This time, it was a message from her old colleague, Dr. Evan Morgan, a Mars researcher who had spent years studying the planet's surface. His words were blunt. Musk isn't just a visionary. He's a man with secrets. Be careful what you dig into. It wasn't the first time Evan had raised concerns about Musk. The two had worked together on several projects in the past, and Evan had always been cautious of Musk's relentless drive to push boundaries. Still, Claire couldn't shake the feeling that this was different. Evan's warning only deepened the intrigue. She arrived at the building and was quickly escorted inside. The sterile, modern environment felt a little colder than usual, and Claire couldn't help but notice the heightened security measures. The tightness in her chest grew as they led her to a small, isolated conference room. It was clear this meeting was meant to be private. As she walked in, Elon Musk was already seated at the head of the table. He looked every bit the genius inventor, his sharp eyes scanning a holographic display in front of him. He didn't look up as she entered, but Claire could feel his presence, intense and calculating. "Mornin', Dr. Bennett," Musk said, his voice calm but carrying a hint of something unreadable. "Please, take a seat." Claire sat down across from him, her heart pounding in her chest. She had met Musk several times before, but this felt different. He was no longer just a tech mogul with grand ideas. Today, he was a man sitting on a secret that could change everything. "I imagine you're wondering why I asked you to come here," Musk said, breaking the silence. He glanced up, his gaze locking onto hers with an intensity that made her feel exposed, as if he were reading her thoughts. "I have a few ideas," Claire replied, trying to sound more confident than she felt. "But let's hear it from you." Musk leaned back in his chair, his fingers steepled in front of him. "I'll be straight with you, Claire. I'm not here to waste time. You know as well as I do that Mars isn't what we've been told. We've all seen the data, the anomalies in the planet's surface, the strange patterns in the geological readings. They're not random. They're evidence of something far bigger, something we've missed. And I believe there's a base. An ancient base. Hidden beneath the surface." Claire took a deep breath, absorbing his words. There was no hesitation in his tone, no sign of the uncertainty that should accompany such an extraordinary claim. Musk was not only certain, he was eager. It was as if the weight of the universe rested on this one revelation. "Why didn't you share this with the world?" Claire asked, her voice betraying the skepticism she felt. "Why now?" Musk's eyes narrowed, and he leaned forward, his voice dropping to a low murmur. "I couldn't. Not yet. The timing had to be right. And the people who need to know, well, they're not ready. But you? You're one of the few who can see this through. You've studied Mars for years. You know the data, and you understand the risks. That's why I need you in on this. We're going to find the base, Claire. And once we do, everything changes." Claire swallowed hard. Her mind raced. The logical part of her wanted to dismiss this as another one of Musk's outlandish ideas. But the scientist in her could not ignore the weight of the evidence. The anomalies. The unexplainable readings. And now, this invitation to be part of something far bigger than any of them had ever imagined. "If we do this, we're risking everything," Claire said carefully, her gaze steady as she met Musk's. "This isn't just a scientific expedition. If there's a hidden base on Mars, if it's not from Earth, we're dealing with something that could change the future of humanity. Do you understand that?" Musk smiled, but it wasn't the usual confident grin that accompanied his public persona. It was a smile tinged with something darker, more calculated. "I understand, Dr. Bennett. But what you're not seeing is the opportunity. The technology, the knowledge, it's all there. We've spent too long thinking of Mars as a barren wasteland. It's not. It's a key to something much larger. Something that could solve many of Earth's problems. And more." Claire sat back in her chair, her mind reeling. The opportunity Musk spoke of was too tantalizing to ignore. But it was also dangerous. If there was a hidden base on Mars, if it was indeed built by an advanced civilization, the implications were far-reaching. Who had built it? And why hadn't humanity discovered it sooner? "What exactly do you need from me?" Claire asked, her voice steady despite the whirlwind of thoughts racing through her mind. Musk's expression softened, almost imperceptibly. "I need you to lead the team. We're already assembling a crew, but I want you to oversee the scientific side of things. We're going to send a mission to Mars. A covert mission. And we need to know everything there is to know about that base. Its origins. Its purpose. And if there's technology there, we need to bring it back." Claire felt a chill run down her spine. The idea of leading such a mission was thrilling, but terrifying. She had spent her career studying Mars, but nothing had prepared her for this. This wasn't about exploring the planet anymore. It was about uncovering a hidden chapter of human history, a chapter that, once opened, could never be closed again. "I'll need access to the data," Claire said after a moment, her voice firm. "Everything you have on Mars, every satellite image, every geological reading. I'll need to run my own analysis." Musk nodded, his eyes lighting up with approval. "You'll have everything you need. Just one condition, Claire." "And what's that?" "You keep this quiet. For now, anyway. No leaks. No public statements. The less people know, the better." Claire hesitated, but then nodded. "I understand." As she left SpaceX headquarters, Claire couldn't shake the feeling that she had just taken her first step down a path that would alter the course of her life. She had no idea where this journey would lead, but one thing was certain: she was about to dive headfirst into a mystery that would shake the foundation of everything she believed. There was a hidden base on Mars. And if Elon Musk was right, the truth was far stranger, and far more dangerous, than anyone could have ever imagined. The next few days were a blur for Claire Bennett. Between meetings, data analysis, and assembling a team of experts, she barely had time to breathe. Elon Musk's invitation to join the mission to Mars had turned her life upside down. She had spent years researching the planet, but nothing had prepared her for the magnitude of what was now at stake. The enormity of the task hit her as she sat in her office, poring over the satellite images Musk's team had provided. The anomalies Musk had mentioned were unmistakable, strange geometric patterns buried deep within the Martian surface. It wasn't natural. These weren't the irregularities that could be attributed to the planet's geological activity. There was structure there, an unmistakable hint of artificial design. As Claire zoomed in on one of the images, her heart skipped a beat. There, barely visible, was the outline of something that looked like a large building. The structure was surrounded by a network of tunnels, as if it had been constructed to withstand the harsh Martian environment. She stared at the image, feeling a mix of awe and dread. "What are we looking at?" she whispered to herself, before shaking her head. She couldn't get lost in the speculation. Not yet. The data had to be analyzed with precision, and the team needed to be briefed. A week later, Claire stood in a sleek, high-tech meeting room at SpaceX headquarters. Musk had invited a handful of people to join the mission, and Claire was tasked with hand-picking the crew. She needed the best in their respective fields: scientists, engineers, and strategists, people who could operate in extreme conditions and who shared a common goal: to uncover the secrets buried on Mars. The door opened, and the team filed in, each member a specialist in their own right. Claire recognized most of them from previous conferences or research collaborations. They were among the best in the world. First to enter was Dr. Ethan Harper, a planetary geologist whose work on Mars soil composition had made waves in the scientific community. Next came Dr. Sophie Lang, an expert in Martian atmospheric studies, whose insights on the planet's weather patterns had already proved invaluable to SpaceX's Mars missions. Following them was Marcus Webb, a former NASA astronaut with years of experience in deep space exploration. And last but not least, Claire's old colleague, Dr. Evan Morgan, had insisted on joining the team. Evan was a Mars expert, but his penchant for secrecy and his doubts about Musk's motives made him an unpredictable variable. "Claire," Musk greeted her as she entered the room, his voice calm and steady. "You've assembled a solid team." Claire nodded, but her thoughts were elsewhere. She wasn't sure what kind of mission they were really embarking on. She had her suspicions, but there was still so much they didn't know. "Let's get down to business," Claire began, addressing the group. "You're all here because Elon Musk believes there's a hidden base on Mars. Our job is to find it. We've been given access to the most up-to-date data and technology available, and will be using the Falcon Heavy to transport the crew and necessary equipment. But we have to move quickly and quietly. This mission is classified, and the less people know, the better. She glanced around at the group, noting the mixture of excitement and uncertainty on their faces. They were scientists and explorers, driven by curiosity in the pursuit of knowledge, but this was uncharted territory. None of them had ever embarked on a mission like this before. "We'll start with the data we have," Claire continued. "The satellite imagery is promising, but we need to conduct ground-based analysis. We'll be landing in a remote region of Mars where these anomalies are concentrated, and from there, we'll investigate the structure. But be warned, this won't be easy. Mars is a hostile environment, and if there's something down there that isn't supposed to be found, we may be facing risks we can't predict." Musk's voice interrupted her as he joined the discussion. "The mission is risky, but it's necessary. We can't afford to wait any longer. This base could hold the key to humanity's future, and we need to know what's there before anyone else does. That means you'll have to think on your feet and adapt to whatever the planet throws at you." There was a moment of silence before Dr. Sophie Lang spoke up. "Elon, you're saying that this base could change everything. What exactly are we looking for? And how do we know we can trust the data?" Musk's eyes flicked to Claire before he responded. "The base may contain technology far beyond anything we've developed on Earth. If it's what I think it is, it could provide the answers to energy, space travel, and even advanced medicine. As for the data, I trust it. We wouldn't be here if I didn't." Evan Morgan leaned forward, his voice filled with skepticism. "And what if we uncover something that's dangerous? Something that's been deliberately hidden for a reason?" The tension in the room thickened. Claire's stomach tightened. Musk was usually unflappable, but Evan's question seemed to hit a nerve. "That's a risk we'll have to take," Musk replied coolly, his face hardening. "We don't have the luxury of waiting for someone else to make the first move." Claire's mind raced as she processed everything. The idea of uncovering advanced technology on Mars was thrilling. But there was an undercurrent of danger that couldn't be ignored. What if this base had been built for a purpose that humanity wasn't ready for? What if the technology wasn't a gift, but a weapon? She had to remind herself that she was a scientist, not a soldier. Her job was to uncover the truth, whatever it might be. As the team prepared for the mission, Claire couldn't help but feel the weight of the responsibility pressing down on her. This wasn't just about exploring a new frontier in space, it was about uncovering the hidden past of a planet that had fascinated humanity for centuries. The countdown to launch began. The crew underwent final training sessions, simulations, and safety protocols. Claire spent long hours in meetings, coordinating logistics and making sure everything was in place. The Falcon Heavy was ready, and the destination was set. Mars was waiting. But deep down, Claire knew that this mission wasn't just another scientific endeavor. Something had changed. The closer they got to launch, the more she realized that this wasn't just a search for knowledge. It was the beginning of a journey that could expose the darkest secrets of the universe, and it was a journey that would change everything. She took one last look at the team, standing together in the mission control room. They were ready. But were they prepared for what they were about to uncover? Only time would tell. The day of the launch arrived faster than Claire had anticipated. As she stood at the observation deck, looking out at the sleek, towering form of the Falcon Heavy rocket against the sky, she could feel a mix of excitement and unease settling in her chest. Everything was ready, every piece of equipment, every calculation, every simulation had been double-checked, triple-checked. This was it. The mission to uncover the hidden base on Mars was about to begin. Claire had been a part of many missions in her career, but none this ambitious, none this shrouded in mystery. As she watched the final stages of the rocket's preparations unfold, she couldn't help but wonder just how far they were willing to go to get answers. They weren't just exploring an alien world anymore. They were walking into a potential Pandora's box. But there was no turning back now. Her thoughts were interrupted by the sound of footsteps behind her. She turned to see Elon Musk approaching, flanked by a few of the SpaceX engineers. His face was unreadable, but his eyes burned with that familiar intensity. "You look like you're having second thoughts," Musk said, his voice calm but carrying an undertone of knowing. He must have sensed the tension in her. "I'm thinking about all the unknowns," Claire admitted. "We've got a solid plan, but we're dealing with things no one's ever dealt with before. A base on Mars? We don't even know who built it or why it's there." Musk glanced out at the rocket, his expression momentarily distant. "You're right. We don't know what's waiting for us. But that's why we're here. The unknown is the greatest frontier we'll ever have. It's why you're here, Claire. You're not afraid of what's out there. You've spent your career studying this planet. Now it's time to understand it at a deeper level." Claire nodded slowly. She had dedicated years of her life to Mars, studying its soil, its atmosphere, its mysteries. But this was different. This was about finding answers that no one had even thought to ask. Before she could respond, the announcement came over the intercom. "All crew members, please proceed to the shuttle. Launch sequence will commence in 30 minutes. The ride to the launch pad was a blur of preparation and anticipation. Claire sat in her seat, running over every detail in her mind, going through the checklists again and again. The Falcon Heavy rocket would carry them to Mars in a matter of months. For now, though, their journey would begin with a brief but crucial trip to low Earth orbit before a larger, deeper space maneuver took them on the path toward the Red Planet. Claire's team, Dr. Ethan Harper, Dr. Sophie Lang, Marcus Webb, and Evan Morgan, was already on board, each of them busy in their own way. Ethan was deep in conversation with Sophie, discussing the latest data on Mars' surface. Marcus was in his seat, already lost in a screen displaying the latest simulations of the mission trajectory. Evan sat in the back, staring out the small window, a look of deep concentration on his face. "Claire," Evan's voice broke through the quiet hum of the shuttle's interior. "You ever wonder if we're doing the right thing? I mean, what if we're walking into something we don't fully understand?" Claire looked at him, feeling a mix of concern and curiosity. She had known Evan long enough to understand that his questions often went deeper than surface level. It was one of the reasons she trusted him. "I don't think we'll ever fully understand until we get there," she said carefully. "But we have to try. We owe it to ourselves, to the world, to find out what's hidden on Mars. If there's something important out there, if it's going to change everything, we need to know." Evan nodded, but his eyes didn't leave the window. "I just hope we're prepared for what we might find." The launch was smooth, and the weightlessness of space was familiar to Claire. She had spent enough time in zero gravity to know how to move, how to orient herself in the confines of a shuttle. But as the ship moved further from Earth, heading toward Mars, a growing unease settled in her chest. The distance between them and everything they knew was expanding, and there was no guarantee that they would return. The trip was long, months of isolation and deep space travel. They made a few stops for minor adjustments and recalibrations, but for the most part, the crew spent their time studying the data and preparing for what lay ahead. The silence of space was both calming and unnerving. There were no distractions, no outside forces to intervene. It was just them, the ship, and the vastness of the universe. As the ship neared Mars, the tension in the cabin grew. The crew had been briefed multiple times on their objectives, but the reality of the mission was beginning to set in. This wasn't just a routine exploration. They were about to make history, but they were also about to walk into a situation that could have unforeseeable consequences. Suddenly, the soft hum of the shuttle's engines grew louder, followed by a jarring series of beeps from the control panel. Claire's heart skipped a beat. "What's going on?" Claire asked, her voice steady despite the rush of adrenaline coursing through her veins. Sophie Lang's fingers flew over the control panel. "It's a strange signal. We've just entered Mars' orbit, and there's an anomaly in the radio frequency coming from the planet's surface." Claire frowned. What kind of signal? It's not like anything we've ever seen, Sophie said, her voice tinged with concern. It's almost as if there's something actively trying to communicate with us. Evan leaned forward, his earlier skepticism now replaced by intrigue. A signal from Mars? But we've never detected anything like that before. Could it be coming from the base? Claire's mind raced. It's possible. If there's something down there, it might be trying to reach us. But we don't know what it is, or whether it's even safe to engage. Marcus stood up, his voice calm but firm. We can't afford to ignore it. Whatever it is, it might give us the lead we need. Claire turned to Musk, who had been quietly observing from the back of the shuttle. His face was hard to read, but his eyes were sharp. Elon, what do you want us to do? Musk took a long breath. Proceed with caution. We need to know what we're dealing with. This mission is classified, but we still need to gather every piece of information we can. Don't engage unless absolutely necessary. Let's see what this signal can tell us first. The crew exchanged uneasy glances. Something was out there on Mars, and it wasn't just waiting for them to arrive. Whatever it was, it seemed to be waiting for them to make the first move. The strange signal echoed through the ship's control systems, its rhythmic pulse almost hypnotic. It was a sound Claire couldn't ignore, a call to something unknown, something waiting for them on Mars. Sophie Lang continued to manipulate the ship's instruments, trying to triangulate the source of the signal, but no matter what she did, the source seemed to be shifting. We're not getting a solid lock on it, Sophie muttered, frustration creeping into her voice. It's almost as if the signal is bouncing off the surface of Mars in a pattern we can't predict. Like it's alive. Claire leaned over to look at the display screen, her eyes narrowing. The signal wasn't just a random noise. There was a structure to it, almost like a code, a sequence of pulses that repeated with a strange regularity. It was unmistakable now. This wasn't some natural occurrence, this wasn't static or solar interference. This was deliberate. We need to decode it, Claire said, her voice steady despite the rising tension in the cabin. Whatever this is, it's trying to tell us something. It's not just static. It's a message. Evan Morgan, who had been silent until now, turned to face her. His expression was unreadable, but his eyes flickered with the kind of suspicion that Claire had grown used to over the years. What if it's not a message? Evan asked quietly, his voice laced with doubt. What if it's a trap? What if someone, or something, on Mars is trying to lure us in? Claire could feel the weight of his words. She'd considered the possibility, but she wasn't ready to jump to conclusions. Fear and paranoia wouldn't help them now. She shook her head, meeting Evan's gaze. We can't afford to be afraid of what we don't understand, she replied firmly. We're here for answers. We need to find out what this is before we make any assumptions. Sophie was still working on the control panel. Her brow was furrowed in concentration as the signal continued to pulse. Then, with a click and a sharp beep, the screen flashed. Sophie gasped. I think I've got it. The rest of the crew gathered around the display as Sophie isolated the source of the signal. The pattern shifted slightly, and then a series of words appeared on the screen. Welcome. You're expected. Claire's heart skipped a beat. The message was clear, unmistakable, and chilling. Who, or what, had sent it? And how did they know they were coming? That's impossible, Dr. Ethan Harper murmured, his voice barely above a whisper. How could it know we were coming? We've only been in Mars orbit for a few hours. Claire felt a shiver run down her spine. There was no way this was a coincidence. This message wasn't just a random signal, it was a direct communication. Whoever, or whatever, was on Mars had been waiting for them. What does this mean? Marcus Webb asked, his voice low. How do we even begin to process this? Claire didn't have an answer. She could feel the pressure mounting, the weight of the unknown pulling them in every direction. But one thing was certain, this wasn't just a scientific expedition anymore. This was something far more dangerous, something that had been set into motion long before they even left Earth. "We need to land," Claire said, her voice steady, though she felt a knot tighten in her stomach. "We need to get to the surface and find the source of this message. We've come this far, and we can't turn back now." Elon Musk, who had been silent in the corner of the cabin, spoke up. "Do we really know what we're getting into here? This message could be a trap, like Evan said. But it could also be a warning. There are a lot of unknowns, and we need to proceed carefully." Claire looked at him, trying to gauge his thoughts. Musk wasn't one to hesitate, but this was different. He understood the stakes of this mission better than anyone. "We have no choice," Claire said, her voice resolute. "The message is clear. We need to investigate. We've been given an invitation, and we can't ignore it." The journey to the surface of Mars took several hours. The spacecraft was carefully maneuvered to avoid the worst of the planet's dust storms and to position itself as close as possible to the coordinates that Sophie had calculated based on the signal. Mars' gravity was weaker than Earth's, and the landing was relatively smooth, but there was a palpable tension in the air as the shuttle descended. Marcus, the astronaut with the most experience, was sitting at the helm, guiding the ship with precision. The rest of the crew was silent, their eyes glued to the windows as the red surface of Mars grew closer. The dry, barren landscape stretched out below them, nothing but endless dust and rock, the kind of desolate terrain Claire had studied for years. Yet today, it looked different. It felt like something was watching them. "Landing in T-3 minutes, Marcus announced, his voice calm and professional. "Prepare for descent." The crew strapped in tightly, securing their harnesses and running through their final checks. Claire's mind was racing. This was the moment they'd all been waiting for, but with each passing second, the unknowns only grew larger. What would they find when they landed? Was the base still intact, or had it been abandoned for centuries? Or was it something more sinister, a trap set by an unknown force, waiting for them to step onto the surface? The shuttle's engines rumbled as the landing gear made contact with the Martian surface. Claire's heart pounded in her chest. "We're down," Marcus said. "Welcome to Mars." The cabin was still for a moment, the weight of the moment settling in. Claire looked out the window once more, her breath catching in her throat as she saw the vast expanse of the Martian desert stretching out before them. In the distance, there were signs of something different, something man-made. Faint outlines of structures, half buried beneath the red dust. "This is it," Claire whispered. "We've found it." As the crew began to prepare for their first steps onto Mars, Claire couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched. The signal, the message, the strange presence they had felt, it all pointed to something more. They weren't alone on this planet. With each step outside the shuttle, the gravity of the situation became more real. The air was thin, almost non-existent. The red dust of Mars swirled in the wind, but the structures on the horizon were becoming clearer. They had to go toward them. There was no other option. "Let's move out," Claire ordered, her voice firm. As they made their way toward the base, the ground beneath their feet felt strange, foreign, and yet all too familiar. They were walking into history, but as they moved closer to the mysterious base, Claire knew one thing for certain: they were no longer just explorers. They were uncovering something far more dangerous. Something was waiting. As Claire and her team approached the first structure, a cold sense of foreboding settled over them. The base, once just a distant and blurry shape on the horizon, now stood before them in all its silent, imposing glory. It wasn't like anything Claire had ever seen on Mars, nor was it something anyone had anticipated finding. It was far too organized, too deliberate. Built into the Martian landscape, the architecture appeared both ancient and unerringly advanced at the same time. The walls were a dull gray, nearly indistinguishable from the surrounding rocky terrain, but as they drew closer, Claire noticed strange symbols etched into the surface. Symbols that didn't belong to any human language she knew, or any language on Earth, for that matter. "We're here," Claire whispered, almost to herself. Her voice barely carried in the thin Martian air, but the rest of the crew had gathered around, their eyes wide with awe and unease. The base stood tall and solid against the endless expanse of the Martian desert, seemingly untouched by time. The desolation of the surrounding landscape made it feel even more out of place, like a relic from another world. Marcus Webb, ever the skeptic, moved forward cautiously. "This doesn't feel right. If this place was built by humans, it's not something we've ever seen before. And if it wasn't, then who built it? And why?" Evan stood beside Claire, his eyes scanning the structure. Could this be a military installation? A secret base? Something from the Cold War era, maybe? "No," Claire interjected, shaking her head. "This is beyond anything we've ever built. The technology, the design, this isn't from Earth." Sophie Lang, who had been quietly studying the symbols, stepped forward. "These markings, they're not just decorative. They seem to have a pattern, almost like some sort of code. I think they might be instructions. Or warnings." The group fell silent as they stared at the symbols, which seemed to pulse in the faint sunlight, giving them an eerie, almost alive quality. "We need to get inside," Claire said, her voice firm. "We need answers." With a hiss of hydraulic pressure, the massive metal doors of the base began to open. The sound reverberated in the stillness, making the crew jump, though they all had their hands ready on their weapons. But the doors opened only slightly, enough to allow them passage. There was no greeting, no automated voice or sound of life from within, just an eerie emptiness. Claire took a deep breath, stepping through the threshold first, followed closely by the rest of the team. The interior was dark, the air stale and dry, but there were lights, dim and flickering, lining the walls. The further they moved into the base, the more they realized how labyrinthine the layout was. Hallways twisted and turned at odd angles, and the floor beneath their boots was smooth, almost unnaturally so. "This place was built to last," Dr. Ethan Harper commented, his voice barely a whisper as he carefully examined the walls. "The materials they used, it's unlike anything we've seen." As the crew ventured deeper into the heart of the base, they came across what appeared to be a central chamber, a large circular room with tall, arching walls. At the center was a massive, metallic platform, its surface covered in intricate designs and patterns. The room was eerily quiet, and it almost seemed as though the space was alive, like it was waiting for them. Claire's heart skipped a beat. There, in the center of the platform, was something that sent a chill down her spine, a screen, glowing faintly with a greenish hue. It wasn't like any technology she had ever seen. "It's active," Sophie said, stepping forward. "The screen is on." Before Claire could respond, the screen flickered, and strange symbols appeared across it. The same symbols that had been etched on the base's exterior. "This must be it," Claire said, her voice filled with awe. "This is the key to understanding what this place is." The symbols began to shift, rearranging themselves into new formations. Then, slowly, a message began to materialize on the screen, the letters blinking into existence one by one. "You are not alone." The words were simple, but their meaning sent a shockwave through the group. The implication was clear. There was something, or someone, else here. Something that had been watching, waiting for them to arrive. The room seemed to close in around them, and Claire could feel the hairs on the back of her neck standing on end. There was a growing sense of unease, a feeling that they had just stumbled upon something that was far beyond their understanding. The message wasn't just a warning, it was a declaration. Evan's voice broke the silence. Who is, you?" he muttered, stepping back, as if the words themselves were too much to bear. "What does this mean?" Claire swallowed hard, her mind racing. There were too many questions, too many unknowns. But one thing was certain, whoever or whatever, had left this message knew they were coming. And if they were going to find answers, they would need to be prepared for anything. Sophie was still standing at the screen, her hand hovering over it. "There's more," she said quietly. "The symbols are changing again. It looks like a map. A map of Mars." The screen flashed once more, and the new image that appeared was startling. It was a map of Mars, but it wasn't just a typical map. There were markings all over the planet, points of interest scattered across its surface, each one glowing with a faint blue light. Claire stepped forward, her mind trying to piece it all together. What are these points? Why are they marked like this? "I think they're locations," Sophie said, her voice still shaky from the strange message. "But I don't know what they are. The system is trying to pinpoint something, or maybe, something we need to find." "We need to explore those points," Claire said decisively. "We've found one base. But these other locations, they could lead to more answers." Marcus, always the pragmatist, spoke up. "We need to be careful. We don't know what's waiting at these sites. But if they have anything to do with this message, we have to go. We're too far in now to turn back." The crew exchanged glances, each of them processing the gravity of their situation. Mars had just gone from a scientific mission to something much more, something dangerous, mysterious, and beyond their control. After a brief discussion, they all agreed, they would investigate the points marked on the map. But they had no idea what they would find, or if they would even survive what lay ahead. Claire couldn't shake the feeling that they were being drawn into something far greater than anything they had ever imagined. Whatever was out there, whatever was waiting for them, it wasn't human. And it wasn't just a relic from the past. It was something alive, something that had been waiting for them for a long time. As they prepared to leave the base and head toward the first marked location, Claire couldn't help but feel that the real mission had only just begun. The harsh Martian winds howled outside as Claire and her team gathered their supplies. The hidden base, which had once felt like a monumental discovery, now felt like the beginning of something far larger, far more dangerous. The map on the screen had shown several locations scattered across Mars, each marked with a glowing blue dot, each promising more answers, but also more peril. Claire couldn't help but wonder what they were walking into. They loaded up their equipment, checked their suits, and made final adjustments. As they prepared to leave the base and head toward the first marked location, the silence inside the chamber was deafening. No one spoke, each person was lost in their thoughts, the weight of the unknown pressing heavily on their shoulders. "All right," Claire finally spoke, breaking the silence. "We need to head to the first marked point. If we're going to get answers, we need to see what's out there." Marcus nodded, checking his communications gear one last time. "Coordinates are set. We're ready to go. But we need to move quickly. I don't like the idea of staying here too long. There's something off about this place." Evan, who had been quiet, spoke up. "I'm with Marcus on this. We've uncovered something big, but it feels like we've just stumbled into someone else's territory. We don't know what's waiting for us." Claire met his gaze, her expression steely. "We don't have a choice, Evan. Whatever it is, we have to face it. We're here to uncover the truth." The team moved through the winding corridors of the base one last time, retracing their steps to the exit. As they stepped outside, the stark, lifeless landscape of Mars greeted them once again. The wind carried the fine red dust, swirling in unpredictable gusts, creating an eerie, otherworldly atmosphere. The land stretched out in every direction, barren and empty. But the map, glowing faintly on Sophie's tablet, pointed them toward a distant mountain range to the north. It was a sharp contrast to the flat plains that surrounded the base. The ridges loomed in the distance, jagged and unforgiving, as though they were the boundary of some ancient secret that had been locked away for millennia. "I've set the route," Sophie said, her eyes scanning the map. "It'll take us a few hours to reach the first location. It's high up in the mountains." Claire nodded, her heart racing. The unknown had never felt so close, and yet so far away. They had no idea what they would find up there. But they couldn't afford to hesitate. The rocky terrain of Mars was even more treacherous than they had anticipated. As they traveled toward the mountains, the landscape shifted. The ground beneath their boots was uneven, rocky, and unpredictable. They had to be careful, avoiding sudden drops and steep inclines, as they made their way up to the first marked point. As they climbed higher, the silence of Mars seemed to envelop them even more. The wind died down, leaving only the sound of their breathing, the crunch of their boots on the rough terrain, and the occasional beep of the navigation equipment. "It's a good thing we've got the suits," Marcus said, breaking the silence again. "Otherwise, I'd be seriously worried about altitude sickness." Claire smiled faintly. "Yeah, me too. But we've got bigger things to worry about than that." Sophie glanced back at Claire, her eyes wide with a mixture of excitement and fear. "What if we find something up there? What if the map is showing us something we shouldn't have found?" Evan's voice was low, almost a whisper. "What if it's not meant for us? What if we're walking into a trap?" Claire's gaze hardened. "We can't afford to think like that. We have a responsibility to see this through. If something is out there, we need to know what it is." The trek felt like it was taking forever, the minutes stretching into hours as they slowly made their way toward the first marked location. The higher they climbed, the more isolated they became. Mars had always felt distant, but now, as they stood on the edge of this desolate, lifeless planet, it felt as though they were walking into the very heart of the unknown. Finally, after hours of climbing, they reached the top of a steep ridge. The view from here was breathtaking, an expanse of red mountains stretching out for miles. The base they had left behind now seemed small, distant, almost insignificant compared to the vastness of Mars. But there, in the center of the ridge, was something else. Something that didn't belong. A large, rectangular shape jutted out from the rocky surface, its metallic surface gleaming under the weak Martian sun. It was partially buried in the rock, as though it had been there for centuries, waiting to be discovered. Claire's breath caught in her throat. This wasn't just a natural formation. This was a structure, an object, a piece of technology, buried beneath the surface, deliberately hidden. "What is that?" Sophie asked, her voice trembling. "I don't know," Claire said, her heart racing. "But we need to get closer." The team carefully approached the structure. It was unlike anything they had seen before. The surface was smooth and metallic, but not like the materials they had studied on Earth. The markings on it were similar to those on the hidden base, but there was something more complex about them, something more intricate. As they neared the structure, the temperature seemed to drop. The air felt heavier, more oppressive. It was as if the very atmosphere around them was charged with energy. Claire felt a tingling sensation run down her spine. Then, without warning, the structure began to hum, a low, vibrating sound that sent vibrations through the ground beneath them. "What the hell?" Marcus said, backing up slightly, his eyes wide. "It's activating," Evan said, a note of fear in his voice. "We've triggered something." Sophie quickly pulled out her tablet, frantically working to scan the object with the equipment. It's connected to something else," she said, her voice filled with awe and confusion. "It's like a key, or a receiver." Claire's heart raced. A key for what? Before anyone could answer, the metallic surface of the structure shifted, revealing an opening, a doorway, or perhaps a hatch, leading deeper into the rock. "I think we've just found the path," Claire said quietly, her voice a mixture of disbelief and determination. They all stood frozen for a moment, staring at the doorway. The weight of their discovery hung heavy in the air, but Claire knew one thing for sure: they had just uncovered something that could change everything. The doorway that had mysteriously revealed itself in the metallic surface was now wide open, as if beckoning them toward the unknown. Claire's mind raced, but her body moved with a controlled urgency. The hum that filled the air was faint, but it was enough to make the hairs on her arms stand on end. This wasn't a natural formation. This was a man-made, or perhaps something else-made, object, and it was inviting them inside. Her team gathered behind her, each of them waiting for her lead. The low, vibrating hum continued, and for the briefest moment, it felt as if the entire mountain was alive, pulsating with energy, almost as if it was aware of their presence. "This is it," Claire said quietly, her voice filled with both awe and fear. "This is what we've been searching for." The doorway was a perfect circle, the edges smooth and precise, far too flawless for anything natural to have created it. As Claire stepped closer, she could see the markings along the edges, symbols she had seen before, but now they glowed faintly, lighting up as though they were reacting to her presence. "We need to be careful," Marcus said, his voice a low warning. "We have no idea what's inside. If this thing is some kind of trap." Claire didn't look back, though she could feel the weight of his words. The air felt thick, as though time itself was holding its breath. She took a deep breath and stepped through the threshold. The moment she crossed the entrance, the temperature dropped sharply, and her breath formed visible mist in the cold air. It wasn't just the temperature that changed, it was the atmosphere itself. The air was dense, almost metallic, and it was as if every molecule inside the structure was charged with energy. Inside, the space was vast and disorienting. The walls were smooth and metallic, stretching out in all directions. There were no windows, no sources of natural light, yet the entire area was bathed in a soft, dim glow that seemed to come from nowhere. The only sound was the distant hum, now louder and more pronounced, vibrating through the floor and into their bones. "What is this place?" Sophie whispered, her voice filled with reverence and awe. She scanned the walls with her tablet, but there was no readable data coming through. It was as if all their equipment was being blocked, distorted by some kind of interference. Claire motioned for the group to move forward. "Stay close. We're going to explore every inch of this place, but we need to stay alert." As they moved deeper into the structure, they came across strange, towering pillars that seemed to extend into the darkness above. The walls were lined with symbols, some of which matched the ones they had seen on the outside, but many others were completely unfamiliar. The more they examined, the more Claire realized how little they understood about the significance of the symbols. They seemed to tell a story, one that was far older, and possibly far more dangerous, than anything they had anticipated. "This is, not just a base," Marcus murmured. "It feels like we're walking through something ancient. Like a temple." "That's exactly what I was thinking," Sophie added, her voice tinged with awe. "But a temple for what? Or who?" Suddenly, a flash of light flickered from the far end of the chamber. Claire's heart skipped a beat. They all froze in place, their eyes darting toward the source of the light. The dim glow had intensified, and now it was clearly emanating from a large structure in the distance, something that looked like an altar, or perhaps a command center. "Let's check it out," Claire ordered, her voice steady despite the unease rising within her. The team moved cautiously toward the structure, the pulsating hum growing louder with every step. As they approached, they could see more clearly. There were markings all over it, similar to the ones that lined the walls, but these seemed to be more intricate, more detailed. They appeared to be instructions. "Does anyone have any idea what these symbols mean?" Sophie asked, running her fingers along the strange etchings. "No clue," Claire admitted, her brow furrowed in concentration. "But we might find something that can explain it further inside." Evan, who had been eerily silent until now, stepped forward. "I don't know if I like this. The deeper we go, the more I feel like we're being watched. Something about this place, it's not just Martian technology." "Are you saying it's not human?" Marcus asked, raising an eyebrow. "Because if it's not, then what the hell are we dealing with?" Evan didn't reply, but the look in his eyes said it all. His unease was palpable, and Claire couldn't deny that she shared it. They had stepped into a world where the rules of reality seemed to bend, where the usual expectations of technology didn't apply. Every turn, every discovery, felt like it brought them closer to something far beyond their comprehension. Finally, as they reached the heart of the structure, they saw it, a massive chamber, the walls lined with glowing panels, each displaying strange, alien symbols. At the center of the room was what appeared to be a control center, or perhaps a power source. It hummed with energy, the vibrations now almost deafening. In the center of the chamber stood a pedestal, a simple structure, but upon it, an object that would change everything. Claire stepped forward, her heart pounding in her chest. The object on the pedestal was cylindrical, smooth, and made of the same metallic material as the walls of the structure. It wasn't large, no bigger than a human torso, but it was undeniably significant. As she approached, the hum intensified. The object seemed to react to her presence, glowing faintly, and suddenly, Claire felt an overwhelming urge to touch it. Without thinking, her hand reached out, brushing the cool surface of the object. In that instant, everything changed. A shock of energy surged through her body, so strong that she gasped, stumbling backward. The others rushed to her side, but before they could say anything, the entire room seemed to shake. The hum grew deafening, the walls of the chamber pulsing with light. Claire's vision blurred, and for a brief moment, she saw something terrifying. Images flashed before her eyes, alien worlds, distant stars, and figures standing in the shadows, watching her. And then, just as suddenly as it had begun, it stopped. The room fell silent. The hum faded. Claire stood there, breathless, her heart pounding. The object on the pedestal was still glowing faintly, but there was no sign of the overwhelming energy that had just surged through her. What the hell was that? Marcus demanded, his voice trembling with fear. I don't know, Claire said, her voice shaking. But I think it just communicated with me. I saw something beyond this place. What did you see? Sophie asked, her voice urgent. Claire paused, trying to process the overwhelming flood of images she had just experienced. I don't know, but I think we're dealing with something far more advanced than we imagined. This isn't just a base. This is a gateway to something much bigger. The silence in the chamber was suffocating. The hum had died down, but the intensity of what they had just experienced lingered in the air. Claire stood still, her hands trembling slightly as she tried to process the visions that had flooded her mind. The room around her seemed to close in, the walls pressing in like they were aware of her confusion. Claire. Sophie's voice broke through her fog, urgent and concerned. What did you see? What's happening? Claire blinked rapidly, trying to shake the images from her mind. I don't know. It was like a vision, but it was more than that. It was like the object communicated with me. Marcus took a cautious step forward, his expression tight with suspicion. Communicated with you? What do you mean, exactly? Did it speak to you? Claire shook her head. No. It didn't speak, but I saw things. Images, of other worlds, distant stars. And there were, beings. Figures in the shadows. Watching us. Evan, who had been standing off to the side, visibly shivered. Figures in the shadows? That's comforting. He shot Claire a wary look. This is what I was afraid of. We have no idea what we're dealing with. We should get out of here. No, Claire said firmly, turning toward Evan. We can't leave. Not yet. I need to understand what this is, what we've just triggered. Sophie moved closer to Claire, her face full of concern. But if this is some kind of alien technology, we don't know what the consequences could be. What if it's not just a message, it could be something worse? Claire hesitated, glancing down at the glowing object on the pedestal. The visions were still fresh in her mind, but something told her that they had only scratched the surface. Whatever this was, it was more than a message, it was a warning. A connection to something far older and far more powerful than they could imagine. I understand your concerns, Claire said quietly. But we can't walk away from this. Not now. We've come this far. We need answers. Evan sighed, rubbing his temples in frustration. And if we don't get the answers we're looking for? If we're opening doors that we can't close again? Then we'll deal with it, Claire said, her voice steady but resolute. We didn't come all this way just to turn back because we're scared. We're here to understand what's on this planet, and beyond it. What if this is the key to everything we've been looking for? Marcus nodded, reluctantly agreeing. She's right. We can't leave now. But we need to be smarter. We need to figure out exactly what this gateway is, how it works, and who, or what, it's meant for. Claire turned back to the object, her eyes narrowing as she tried to make sense of the strange etchings and symbols surrounding it. They were unlike anything she had seen before. The language was foreign, but there was a pattern to it, one that hinted at something far more complex than mere decoration. The symbols weren't random, they were a message. The challenge, of course, was deciphering it. Sophie pulled out her tablet again, scanning the walls, the object, and the surrounding area. If we can connect this to some kind of interface, we might be able to translate it, she said, fingers flying across the screen. Claire stepped closer, examining the pedestal. There was no obvious way to interact with the object, no buttons or switches. But she felt a pull, an instinct that told her the next step was not to analyze it from a distance but to engage with it directly. Without thinking, she reached out again, her fingers brushing lightly against the smooth surface of the cylinder. The moment her skin made contact, the hum returned, but this time, it was different. The vibrations coursed through her body again, but there was no shock this time, just an overwhelming sense of connection. Her breath hitched as new images flooded her mind. This time, they were more vivid, clearer. She saw massive structures floating in space, city-like environments on other planets, and then, the figures. The shadowy beings, now clearer than before. Their faces were hidden in darkness, but their presence was undeniable. They were watching, waiting. Claire gasped, pulling her hand away. The vision faded instantly, but the intensity of it lingered in the air. What did you see this time? Sophie asked, her voice laced with concern. More, Claire whispered, her voice barely audible. I saw their faces, those beings. But it's like they were, not human. Not anything we've ever encountered. Evan's eyes widened, and for the first time, he seemed genuinely afraid. So they're not Martian. Then what are they? I don't know, Claire replied, her gaze distant. But I think they're the ones who built this place. And this object is part of something much larger, something that spans across galaxies. Marcus clenched his fists, his brow furrowed. This is insane. We're talking about aliens, real, actual aliens. And we've just triggered some kind of activation sequence. What if we've just set something in motion that we can't stop? The question hung in the air, unanswered, as Claire stood frozen, contemplating the magnitude of their discovery. She had expected to find remnants of an ancient civilization, perhaps relics of a long-forgotten race. But what they had uncovered was far beyond that. They had stumbled upon a gateway, a connection to an advanced, possibly extraterrestrial power. And the implications were staggering. We can't turn back now, Claire said firmly, looking each team member in the eye. We need to push forward. There's too much at stake. We need to find out what this gateway leads to. We have to understand what it means for us, for Earth, and for the future of humanity. All right, Marcus said, his voice tight with uncertainty but also determination. We're in this together, and we'll get through it. But we need to be cautious. We don't know what's on the other side of this. We don't know anything for sure, Sophie added. But if we're going to do this, we have to be prepared. This could be our one shot at answering the biggest questions we've ever had about space, technology, and the origins of life. Claire nodded, the weight of responsibility settling over her. We're taking a leap into the unknown. But I believe this is the future, our future. With that, Claire turned back to the object. The hum had softened to a gentle pulse, almost rhythmic now. It was waiting. The object had activated, and somehow, it was calling to her, calling to all of them. They didn't know what lay ahead, but they knew one thing for certain: the answers they were seeking were within their grasp. And they were about to step through a gateway that could change everything. The hum of the object was now a low, constant vibration that seemed to resonate through the entire structure, almost as though the walls themselves were alive, breathing. Claire stood in front of the pedestal, her fingers still tingling from the energy that had surged through her moments before. Her team remained silent, tense, as they processed the enormity of what they had just stumbled upon. The room was eerily still, save for the soft glow emanating from the object. It seemed to pulse, not in rhythm with their hearts, but in a way that made it feel as though it were beating to its own, foreign pulse. It was as if it were waiting for them to make the next move, a step into the unknown. Sophie was the first to break the silence. So, we know this is some kind of gateway, but a gateway to what? To whom? We still don't have any answers. What do we do next? Claire's gaze was fixed on the glowing object in front of her. She didn't know the answer to Sophie's question, not yet. But something in her gut told her they were on the cusp of something enormous, something that could change everything. It was like standing at the edge of an ocean, knowing the tides would soon pull them into the depths, but uncertain of what lay beneath. We keep going, Claire said, her voice steady. We've come this far, and I'm not walking away now. Whatever this is, whatever this leads to, we need to see it through. Marcus, always the pragmatic one, raised an eyebrow. You're not worried about what might happen if we continue? We still don't understand what we're dealing with, and we have no idea what could be on the other side of that portal. I'm not worried, Claire said, her voice unwavering. I'm determined. I can feel it, Marcus. This is our chance to understand something bigger than ourselves. Something that could help us, or destroy us. Evan, who had been standing apart from the group, finally spoke up. What if we're not supposed to understand it? What if we're poking a hornet's nest here? Then we'll deal with it, Claire said, glancing back at him. We can't stop now. The team was quiet for a long moment. The tension between caution and curiosity was palpable. Finally, Sophie stepped forward. Okay, then. But if we're doing this, we need a plan. We need to understand how to operate this thing, or at least figure out how to move forward without accidentally triggering something we can't control. Claire nodded. Agreed. Let's start by figuring out how to interact with this structure. We've already seen that it responds to touch, so let's experiment with that. They moved closer to the pedestal, all eyes trained on the object that seemed to hum and pulse in response to their presence. Claire reached out again, her fingers grazing the smooth surface of the cylinder. This time, there was no immediate surge of energy, no vision. But the hum grew louder, more insistent, as if something deep within the structure was reacting to their proximity. Okay, now what? Marcus asked, watching her closely. I'm not sure, Claire admitted. But we've got to keep pushing. There's got to be more to this, some kind of mechanism we're not seeing. Sophie crouched down next to Claire, pulling out her tablet once again. Maybe I can find a way to decode the signals or figure out a pattern in these markings. She scanned the pedestal and the surrounding walls, her eyes flicking between her tablet and the strange symbols that adorned every surface. There's something about this place, it's almost like it's alive. It's reacting to us. The more Sophie scanned the area, the more it became clear. The symbols weren't static, they were shifting, changing, almost as if they were in motion. It wasn't a visual trick. These symbols were alive, and they were communicating. Look at this. Sophie exclaimed, tapping rapidly on her tablet. These symbols are moving. They're creating new patterns every few seconds. It's like they're trying to tell us something. Can you read them? Claire asked, leaning over Sophie's shoulder to get a better look. I don't know, Sophie said, her voice tinged with excitement. But I think I can try to reverse engineer the pattern. There's definitely a logic to it. It's like they're trying to build up to something. Claire nodded. Good. Work on that. We need answers, and fast. Time seemed to stretch in the quiet of the chamber. Sophie continued to scan the symbols, her eyes glued to the screen as she tried to decode the shifting patterns. Marcus stood at the entrance of the chamber, keeping watch. Evan, still anxious, paced in small circles. Claire kept her focus on the pedestal, her mind racing with the possibilities. Was this a message from an ancient civilization? Was it something left behind by a race long since gone, or was it a signal, an invitation from an intelligence far beyond their understanding? Then, as Sophie's tablet emitted a sharp ping, the room seemed to shift. The air grew thick again, the hum vibrating through the walls and floors. Claire's heart raced as she saw Sophie's eyes widen in shock. I think I figured it out, Sophie said, her voice barely a whisper. What? Claire asked, stepping forward. These symbols, Sophie said, her voice shaky with excitement. They're a kind of code. A message, but it's not just a message, it's a map. A map to something. But not on Mars, on another planet. Somewhere far from here. A map? Claire repeated, incredulous. To another planet? Sophie nodded. Yes, but it's not just any planet. The coordinates are pointing to a system that we've never explored. It's deep in the Andromeda galaxy, beyond anything we could have imagined. Marcus looked at the tablet in disbelief. That's impossible. We've been mapping the stars for decades, and nothing in that region even remotely resembles these coordinates. I know, Sophie said, her voice trembling. But it's right here, on this tablet. This object, this gateway, is showing us a path that leads somewhere we didn't even think was possible. Claire stared at the map on the tablet, her heart pounding. They had just uncovered a hidden truth, something that had been buried, waiting for someone to find it. And now, they were holding the key to something far greater than they had ever imagined. The team stood in stunned silence as the weight of their discovery sank in. The map was real. And it led to a place beyond their comprehension. Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. Claire and her team have unlocked a hidden map that leads to another galaxy, but what lies there? What secrets are hidden in the Andromeda system? The journey is far from over. Stay tuned for the next chapter. The chamber was still, save for the soft hum that had now become a constant presence in the background. It wasn't just a noise, it was an almost tangible force, reverberating through the very air, the ground beneath their feet, and deep into their bones. The reality of what they had just discovered was slowly settling in, but the magnitude of it was almost too much to comprehend. Claire's mind raced, trying to process the implications of Sophie's revelation. A map to another galaxy. A system they had never even considered exploring, one so far beyond their reach that even the most advanced telescopes had failed to detect it. And now, here they were, standing in the middle of a Martian underground base, holding the key to a journey that would take them farther than any human had ever ventured before. Sophie, her fingers still hovering over the tablet, seemed frozen in place, as if she herself was struggling to come to terms with the data she had uncovered. This can't be real, Marcus muttered, his voice tinged with disbelief. I mean, it's one thing to find some ancient ruins here on Mars, but this is a map to another galaxy. And it's pointing to a system we've never even heard of. I know, Sophie said, her voice shaky. I've checked and double-checked the coordinates. This is legit. The data's coming from the object itself. It's like it's communicating directly with the tablet, feeding us information we couldn't have found on our own. Evan, who had been pacing nervously, suddenly stopped and turned to face the group. But why? Why would this thing lead us to another galaxy? What's the point? What's there? Answers, Claire said, her voice low but firm. It's giving us a chance to find the answers to everything. Whatever's out there, it's connected to this object, and to whatever's been hidden on Mars. Claire's words seemed to settle over the group like a weight. No one spoke for a long moment, the reality of their situation sinking in. They had come here to investigate the origins of a mysterious structure, and now, they were holding a map to something even bigger, something that could change the course of human history. We need to go, Claire said, breaking the silence. We need to follow this. If there's even a chance that this map leads us to the answers we're looking for, we have to go. What do you mean, go? Evan asked, his eyes wide with concern. You can't be serious. We're on Mars, far from Earth, and now you want us to follow coordinates to another galaxy. You're talking about something that's light years away. How do you even plan on getting there? We have technology, Marcus said, his voice hardening. We've got ships, equipment. It might not be as advanced as we want, but we've made significant progress since the first missions to Mars. If this map is real, we can find a way to get there. Evan stared at him incredulously. You want us to trust this thing? Whatever this is, we still don't know if we can even understand how it works. We don't have a choice, Claire replied, her gaze intense. We've uncovered something that's far beyond our comprehension. We're already involved. This is bigger than all of us, and if we don't act now, we might never get another chance. The group exchanged uneasy glances, the weight of the decision hanging in the air. It was clear that they had reached a crossroads. They had come here to understand the origins of Mars, to explore an ancient civilization that had left behind its mark. But now, they were staring into the abyss of the unknown, a journey that would take them far beyond Mars, far beyond anything humanity had ever dreamed of. Evan let out a deep breath, still pacing as his mind raced through every possible scenario. This is crazy. You're talking about traveling light years. That's not just some small step. We could be walking into something that we can't control. I know, Claire said, her voice calm but determined. But we've come too far to stop now. Whatever this is, whatever the reason this map exists, we have to follow it. If we don't, we may never know the truth about who built this structure, who, or what, was here before us. We have to understand what's at stake. Marcus nodded slowly, his expression resolute. I agree. We don't know exactly what we'll find, but I think this is the only way to answer the questions that have been plaguing humanity for centuries. Sophie stood up, wiping a tear from her cheek. It's terrifying. But I don't think we can back down now. We've opened a door, and there's no way to close it. We need to go, even if we don't know where it leads. Evan's face softened as he turned toward the others. I don't like it. But you're right. If we don't take this chance, someone else will. And who knows what they'd do with the information. We can't let it fall into the wrong hands. Claire smiled, grateful for Evan's reluctant acceptance. Exactly. We don't know what we're walking into, but we're doing this together. We'll figure it out. With that, the decision was made. There was no turning back. They had uncovered the first clue in a mystery that spanned galaxies, a secret hidden for millennia. And now, they had to follow the map and see where it led. The next few hours were a blur of activity as the team moved quickly to prepare for the next phase of their journey. They packed their equipment, double-checked their supplies, and worked to ensure that the ship they had arrived on was capable of making a long-distance journey. They would need to leave Mars as soon as possible and head toward the coordinates Sophie had unlocked. There was a sense of urgency in the air, but also an undeniable sense of excitement. They were no longer just explorers of an ancient Martian civilization. They were on the cusp of something far bigger, something that could change everything. As the team loaded up the ship, Claire took one last look at the mysterious object, still glowing softly in the chamber. It had led them this far, and now it was time to follow its clues to the next chapter of their journey. What lay ahead was unknown, but Claire was certain of one thing: their lives would never be the same again. "Ready?" she asked, turning to her team. Everyone nodded, though there was a nervous edge to their movements. They had no idea what they were walking into, but they had no choice but to move forward. Claire took a deep breath, then boarded the ship, her heart pounding with anticipation. The journey into the unknown was about to begin. The silence inside the spacecraft was almost suffocating as Claire sat in the pilot's seat, hands gripping the controls with determination. The team was now settled in their seats, each person lost in their thoughts as they prepared for a journey that was unlike any other humanity had ever undertaken. The hum of the ship's engines provided a low, constant background noise, but there was something deeper in the air, an undercurrent of anticipation, fear, and uncertainty. The spacecraft, a sleek and efficient design made for deep space exploration, had been equipped with the latest technology for long-distance travel. It wasn't perfect, nothing in space ever was, but it was the best they had. The team had spent hours going over the ship's systems, ensuring that everything was in top condition before they left Mars. The coordinates Sophie had unlocked were already programmed into the navigation system, and in a few moments, they would be leaving the Martian atmosphere behind, heading for the uncharted depths of the Andromeda Galaxy. "Everything's green across the board," Marcus reported from his station, his voice calm but tinged with a note of unease. "We're good to go." Sophie, sitting across from him, adjusted her headset and pulled up the latest readings from her tablet. "I've analyzed the data again, and I still don't fully understand what's on the other side of those coordinates. It's so far beyond anything we've ever encountered. If there's anything living out there, it's unlike anything we know." "We're not going to know until we get there," Claire said, her voice steady. "But that's why we're doing this. We can't be afraid of the unknown. If we don't take this step, we'll never understand what's really out there. We're explorers. It's in our nature to seek the truth." Evan, who had been unusually quiet, finally spoke up from the back of the ship. "I get it, Claire. But what if we're not supposed to find the truth? What if we're not meant to know what's out there?" Claire met his gaze in the rearview mirror. His face was pale, his usual bravado replaced by genuine worry. She could see that his nerves were getting the best of him, and while she understood his fear, she wasn't about to let it derail their mission. "I know it's scary," she said softly. "But we've already come this far. If we turn back now, we'll always wonder what might have been. The stakes are too high. We need to push forward." Evan exhaled sharply, running a hand through his hair. "I don't know if I'm ready for this." "You don't have to be," Claire said. "None of us are. But we're in this together. Whatever happens, we face it as a team." Sophie's voice broke the tension. "We're leaving Mars now. It's time." The ship's thrusters fired up, and the roar of the engines shook the hull. With a sudden jolt, the spacecraft lifted off from the surface of Mars, rising slowly through the thin atmosphere before breaking free into the vacuum of space. The red planet, once so close and familiar, slowly shrank away in the viewports until it was nothing more than a distant speck in the vastness of space. The transition was seamless. The ship was in motion, and they were now headed for the Andromeda Galaxy, a place that no human had ever set foot in, a place that held secrets far beyond their comprehension. But that didn't matter now. What mattered was that they had made the decision to move forward, to take the leap into the unknown. The first few days of the journey were a blur of routine. The team settled into the rhythms of long-distance space travel, their days filled with checks, adjustments, and quiet conversations. There was little to do but wait and watch as the stars around them seemed to stretch and warp as the ship accelerated through space. As the days passed, the reality of their mission began to sink in. The object on Mars, the map it had provided, and the journey they were undertaking, everything had felt so abstract, and they were standing in that underground chamber. But now, in the confines of the ship, the enormity of it all was pressing down on them. Claire found herself spending long hours in the cockpit, staring at the view screen as the stars stretched into endless streaks of light. She couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched, that there was something just beyond their reach, something waiting for them to discover it. But it wasn't just a feeling, it was a certainty. She could feel it in her bones. They were close to something monumental, and whatever it was about to reveal itself. It was on the fourth day into the journey when something unexpected happened. Sophie had been going over the data again, her eyes scanning the readings, when she looked up, her face pale. "Claire," she said, her voice tight with urgency. "There's something wrong with the ship's systems. It's subtle, but I'm seeing fluctuations in the power grid. Nothing catastrophic, but I don't like it." Claire immediately pulled up the diagnostics, her heart skipping a beat as she saw what Sophie meant. There were small discrepancies in the energy output, barely noticeable, but enough to raise suspicion. The ship's systems should have been running smoothly. There shouldn't have been any glitches, not this early in the journey. "What kind of fluctuations?" Claire asked, her voice steadied despite the unease creeping in. "It's like there's interference," Sophie said, typing rapidly on her tablet. "The energy levels are spiking in irregular patterns. It doesn't make sense. And I've been scanning for anything outside of our ship's systems, nothing should be causing this." Evan's voice came through the intercom, slightly crackling. "What are we looking at, Claire? Are we in danger?" Claire looked over the readings again. It was hard to say, but they were definitely dealing with something unusual. "I don't know yet. But stay alert. I'll run some diagnostics and see if I can pinpoint what's going on. We need to make sure nothing's wrong before we hit the coordinates." The team fell silent as Claire worked, her fingers flying over the console, trying to isolate the cause of the power fluctuations. Every scan, every check returned a different result, and the deeper she dug, the more uneasy she became. It was as if something was trying to connect with them, something beyond their control. Suddenly, the power spiked again, causing the lights to flicker. "What the hell is going on?" Marcus muttered under his breath. And then, before anyone could react, the ship's alarms began blaring, louder and more frantic than ever. The alarms screamed in the confined space of the ship, the high-pitched whine vibrating through every surface. Claire's hand flew to the control panel as she frantically tried to silence the noise, but it persisted, echoing through the metal hull. She could feel the tension in the air, thick and oppressive. The crew was on edge, their eyes darting between the flashing lights and the steady hum of the engines. Something wasn't right. "Shut it down." Evan's voice crackled through the intercom, his words laced with panic. "What's happening? What's going on?" Claire's fingers flew over the console, trying to stabilize the systems. "It's the power grid," she said, her voice strained. "There's interference. I can't get a clear read on it." Sophie's face was pale, her eyes wide with concern. "It's not just the power grid. The interference is coming from outside the ship. It's almost like someone's trying to hack into our systems. But there's no way for that to happen from outside." Claire's mind raced. What kind of technology could cause this? And more importantly, who, or what, was behind it? "Can you isolate where it's coming from?" Claire asked, trying to remain calm. "I'm working on it," Sophie replied, her fingers flying over her tablet as she accessed the ship's sensors. The seconds stretched into what felt like hours as the team waited, anxiety thick in the air. Suddenly, Sophie's voice broke the silence. "I've got something. It's not a signal, at least not like any we've ever encountered. It's more like a field, something surrounding us." "Is it dangerous?" Marcus asked, his voice steady but with a clear edge of concern. Sophie hesitated. I don't know. It's affecting our systems, but it's hard to say if it's something natural or something deliberate. Claire frowned, staring at the readings. Could this be what's been causing the fluctuations in the energy grid? Could it be linked to the coordinates we're heading toward? Sophie nodded slowly. That's what I'm afraid of. Whatever it is, it's definitely connected to where we're going. The ship's systems buzzed again, and the lights flickered once more. This time, however, the interruption was followed by a low, guttural sound, a hum, like the vibration of something massive moving just outside their ship. Everyone went still, the atmosphere in the cockpit now thick with tension. Claire's breath hitched as she looked out into the vastness of space. Nothing was visible. The stars remained unchanged, distant and cold. But the hum was unmistakable, a low-frequency sound that seemed to resonate in the very core of their being. What is that? Evan asked, his voice barely above a whisper. What the hell is making that noise? I don't know, Claire replied, her voice tight. But I think it's coming from the coordinates we're heading to. The hum intensified, vibrating through the ship with increasing intensity. Claire's heart raced in her chest. We need to keep our course. Whatever this is, it's a part of the mission. We can't turn back now. But as the sound grew louder, the ship's power dipped again, and this time it wasn't just a fluctuation. The lights flickered once more, but then they went completely out, plunging the ship into darkness. Damn it, Marcus swore, his voice strained. The backup generators should have kicked in by now. We're losing power. Sophie's voice was frantic as she scrambled to check her tablet. This isn't right. I'm seeing massive interference from something outside, something huge. Evan stood, pacing again, his anxiety reaching a boiling point. This is it, isn't it? We're not just being followed or scanned. Something is out there, something that doesn't want us here. Claire stood up, her expression resolute. We're not backing down. I don't care what's out there. We've come too far, and we need to see this through. But even as she spoke, she felt a creeping unease settle in the pit of her stomach. They were heading into unknown territory, and now they had a new threat, a force, an entity, or something that was trying to stop them. Whatever it was clear they weren't alone. The ship's systems were failing, one by one. The communication systems were down, and they had no way of reaching Earth, or even the nearest station. Sophie worked desperately, trying to bring the power back online, but the interference was too strong. Every attempt to regain control of the ship's systems seemed to be met with resistance. We're completely blind now, Sophie muttered, frustration lacing her voice. No communication, no navigation, nothing. I can't even get a clear reading on our location. Claire's mind was racing, trying to think of the best course of action. We need to get the power back. We need to stay on course. But as she turned to look out of the viewport, her breath caught in her throat. There, in the distance, just beyond the stars, was something she hadn't expected to see. A massive, dark shape loomed in the void of space, too large to be a natural formation, too deliberate in its structure. It was an object, something artificial, and it was heading directly toward them. The hum that had been vibrating through the ship grew louder, more intense. It was coming from the massive structure, now unmistakably visible in the dark expanse of space. What the hell is that? Marcus gasped, his eyes wide with disbelief. I think it's the source of the interference, Sophie said, her voice trembling. But I don't know what it is. That thing is huge. And it's heading straight for us. Claire's mind raced as she calculated the situation. They couldn't outrun it, and with their systems still malfunctioning, they had no way of defending themselves. Brace for impact, Claire ordered, her voice steady despite the fear coursing through her veins. We don't know what it is, but we need to get a closer look. Whatever that is, it's the key to everything. The ship jolted again as the massive object drew nearer, its silhouette becoming clearer with every passing second. The unknown was upon them. And they were going straight toward it. The massive object loomed closer, its sheer size impossible to comprehend. It was as if a shadow had descended from the heavens, consuming the space around them. The ship's hull groaned as it vibrated with the intensity of the force emanating from the object. Claire's knuckles whitened as she gripped the control panel, trying to keep the ship steady. But it was clear, there was no way they could avoid it. They were heading straight into the heart of something unexplainable. "What the hell is that thing?" Evan asked again, his voice barely audible as he looked through the viewport, wide-eyed. His hands trembled as they rested on the back of his seat, a clear sign that his fear was taking over. Sophie's fingers flew across her tablet, eyes locked on the readouts. "It's not a ship, at least not like any we've seen before. There's no heat signature, no propulsion system, it's just, there." She paused, her breath catching. "It's almost like it's alive." Claire's heart raced, her mind trying to make sense of what they were facing. An object that didn't obey any known laws of physics. A massive structure, with no detectable propulsion, no visible purpose, just a silent, looming presence in space. And it was coming straight for them. The hum intensified once more, vibrating through the entire ship like an invisible force, shaking their bodies to their very core. It wasn't just the ship's systems that were affected anymore. It felt as if their minds, their very consciousness, were being drawn into the unknown, pulled toward the object in a way that was both terrifying and hypnotic. "We have to make contact," Claire said, her voice calm, though her mind was a whirlwind of uncertainty. She had never been a fan of recklessness, but they had no choice now. They were too close. "Sophie, can we get a better look? Are there any sensors left functioning?" I'm trying," Sophie said, still typing frantically, but her frustration was palpable. "Most of our systems are down, but I'm getting some strange readings on the object itself. It's not sending out a signal, but it's reacting to us. The energy it's emitting is fluctuating, like it's aware of our presence." Marcus, who had been silently observing, finally spoke up, his voice laced with awe. "It's alive? Is that what you're saying? We're staring at something sentient?" Sophie didn't answer immediately. She just stared at the readings, her brow furrowed in concentration. "It's not like anything I've ever seen before. But yes, it seems to be responding to us in some way. It's almost like we've triggered something." Before anyone could say another word, the ship jolted again. The object, now mere kilometers away, sent a shockwave that rattled every system. The lights flickered violently, then went completely dark once again. The hum had transformed into something more distinct, a low, resonating vibration that seemed to penetrate every fiber of their beings. Then, out of nowhere, the screen in front of Claire came to life. A single word appeared on the display in large, blocky letters, as though burned directly into the ship's systems. "Welcome." It wasn't a sound. It wasn't a voice. It was simply an imprint, as if the ship itself was receiving a transmission from something far more advanced than humanity could imagine. Claire's heart skipped a beat. A chill ran down her spine as she realized that whatever was on the other side, it had just made its first move. "What does that mean?" Evan asked, his voice shaking. "Who's saying that?" "I don't know," Claire replied, her voice barely above a whisper. She felt a strange compulsion to reach out and touch the screen, as if the word itself was calling to her. But she fought the urge. "But we need to stay calm. This is the moment we've been waiting for. We can't let fear control us." The ship shuddered again, and the word on the screen blinked, changing. "Come closer." This time, the message was followed by a series of strange symbols, geometric shapes that shifted and morphed into one another. The symbols seemed to pulse with a light of their own, but there was no explanation for what they meant. Sophie's fingers were moving rapidly across her tablet, trying to decode the symbols, but they were unlike anything she had encountered in all her years of studying alien languages and technology. "I don't understand," Sophie said, her voice filled with frustration. "I can't make sense of this. These symbols don't correspond to anything in our database." Claire took a deep breath, her gaze fixed on the screen. "Maybe we're not supposed to understand them, not yet. Maybe this is just the beginning of something much bigger. We have to go closer. The closer we get, the more we'll learn." "But what if it's dangerous?" Evan asked, his voice rising. "What if it's a trap? We don't know anything about what's on the other side. We could be walking straight into a nightmare." "I know," Claire said, turning to him with a firm resolve. "But we're not turning back. This is humanity's chance to make history. We can't let fear stop us now. Whatever this is, we're in it together." Sophie swallowed hard. "I'll try to bring the systems back online, but it's not going to be easy." Claire nodded. "Do what you can. We're going forward." As Sophie worked on the tablet, Claire kept her eyes fixed on the looming structure outside the ship. The words, "Welcome and come closer," were etched into her mind. It was undeniable now. They were being summoned. And there was no turning back. The ship moved slowly forward, guided by something they couldn't understand, drawn into the unknown by an invisible force that was pulling them closer to the object. The hum grew louder again, louder than before, vibrating through the walls of the ship and shaking them to their very bones. "What's happening?" Marcus asked, his voice laced with panic. But Claire only had one answer. "We're about to find out." The ship moved forward, its hull groaning under the strain, as if even the metal was struggling to understand the pull of the object in front of them. The hum was deafening now, vibrating through every inch of their bones, their minds, as though the very essence of the ship was becoming intertwined with something far greater. The lights flickered again, then went out entirely, leaving them in complete darkness. The only thing that remained was the steady vibration of the hum, growing more intense by the second. It was all-encompassing now, seeping into their consciousness, making it harder to think clearly. Claire fought the urge to close her eyes, to block out the overwhelming sensation. The air in the ship felt thick, like it was charged with static electricity. "Stay focused," Claire said, her voice low and steady, trying to keep everyone grounded. She could hear the tremor in her own voice, but she refused to let the fear consume her. "We've made it this far. We need to stay together, stay calm." Evan, sitting across from her, didn't seem to hear her. His eyes were wide, unfocused, as though he were caught in a trance, staring out into the void. Sophie, hunched over her tablet, was typing rapidly, her brow furrowed in concentration, but it was clear she was overwhelmed as well. "I can't keep up with these readings," Sophie muttered, her voice tight with frustration. "Every time I try to stabilize the systems, the interference spikes. It's like something is overriding everything we're doing." Claire's grip tightened on the armrest as she stared out into the abyss. The dark shape of the object was now enormous, filling the entire view. It was impossible to fathom its size. Nothing in their previous missions, nothing in human history, had ever prepared them for something like this. And yet, they were drawing closer, closer still. Then, as if responding to their presence, the object shifted. It was subtle at first, but unmistakable. A ripple spread across its surface, and a low, resonating tone echoed through the ship, matching the frequency of the hum. It was as though the object itself was alive, breathing in the cold emptiness of space. Claire's eyes widened as the realization hit her. This wasn't just an object. This was a living, sentient entity. "Sophie," Claire said, her voice barely above a whisper, as though speaking too loudly might shatter the fragile reality around them. "What do you make of that? The ripples on the surface?" Sophie, still staring at her tablet, didn't answer immediately. She was too focused, too lost in trying to piece together the data. But after a long pause, she looked up, her expression pale. "I think I think the ship is reacting to us. It's like it's communicating, but not in a way that we can understand yet. I'm seeing fluctuations in the energy field. It's like it's trying to decode us. Sophie shook her head. But I don't know how. There's nothing in our databases that even remotely compares to this. Claire's mind raced. How could they communicate with something they couldn't even begin to understand? Before she could voice another thought, the ship's systems abruptly flickered back to life. The lights blazed once again, blinding them momentarily, and the hum dimmed slightly. The word "welcome" flashed again on the screen, followed by new symbols. But this time, they weren't just random geometric shapes. These symbols formed into something that resembled a pattern, a sequence that had an almost mathematical rhythm to it. Sophie leaned forward, her eyes scanning the symbols, her fingers trembling over the tablet. These aren't just random shapes. This is a code, one we can actually start to break down. But, it's unlike anything I've ever seen. It's not from any civilization we've encountered. Marcus, who had been silent for most of the journey, now spoke up. What are you saying? This is alien. A message from them? I think it's possible, Sophie replied, her voice steady, but with a growing sense of awe. Whatever this object is, it's trying to communicate with us. The symbols are mathematical in nature, like they're trying to tell us something fundamental. Claire turned to face her, her eyes narrowing. Then we need to decode it. Every second counts now. We're too close to turn back. Whatever this is, it's here to engage with us, whether we're ready or not. As she spoke, the object, no, the entity, seemed to react. The ripples intensified, then ceased abruptly, and the ship shook once again, this time more violently. The force was so intense that Claire had to grip the console to keep from being thrown from her seat. Sophie! Claire shouted over the rumbling. What's happening? I don't know. Sophie cried out. I can't stabilize the ship. The interference is too strong, and these symbols are. Before she could finish, the ship lurched forward, and the lights flickered one final time before going out once again. For a moment, there was nothing but silence, an eerie stillness that felt almost unnatural. Then, in the dark, a single word appeared on the screen once more. Knowledge. It was brief, but it was profound. It was as if the entity was offering them something, an invitation. And yet, it was still unclear what exactly it wanted or expected from them. Evan was the first to speak. His voice was filled with both awe and fear. It's trying to teach us something, isn't it? This thing, it's offering us something. But what? Claire stared at the screen, her pulse quickening. This was it, the moment they had been preparing for, the moment they had been waiting for. But what came next? Was this truly a step toward discovery? Or were they being drawn into something far darker, far more dangerous than they could ever have imagined? We need to be careful, Claire said, her voice steady despite the chaos unfolding around them. We're standing on the edge of something monumental. But we don't know what it means yet. We have to tread carefully. Sophie looked up, her eyes wide. I think we're about to find out what it all means. If we're ready to open that door. The tension aboard the ship was palpable as Claire stared at the word knowledge flashing on the screen. The silence that followed felt thick, suffocating even. The hum had ceased, leaving only the faint buzzing of the ship's remaining systems in the quiet aftermath. The crew was frozen, not daring to speak, as though the very atmosphere had changed in response to the entity's message. Claire couldn't tear her eyes away from the screen. That single word seemed to hang in the air, more like an enigma than a simple statement. Knowledge. Was it an invitation? A warning? Or something else entirely? She had no answers, only questions, and the weight of those questions pressed down on her like an unbearable burden. What do we do now? Evan's voice broke the silence, shaky and uncertain. It was clear he was terrified. They all were. This was beyond anything any of them had ever imagined, and the stakes were higher than ever. "We move forward," Claire said, her voice firm, but with a trace of hesitation she couldn't entirely suppress. "We have no other choice. We're already here. The only way out now is through." Sophie nodded slowly, her fingers hovering over the tablet, trying to make sense of the unreadable symbols still appearing in front of them. I think I can get a clearer reading, but it's going to take time. The data's so scrambled right now, I can barely track it. But I'm seeing patterns, they're there, just hard to decipher." "What kind of patterns?" Marcus asked, his voice a mix of curiosity and concern. Sophie exhaled, almost as if she were trying to steady herself. "It's like layers. Almost like a puzzle. Each set of symbols builds on the previous one, like they're trying to convey something in stages. If we follow the right steps, maybe we can figure it out. And if we don't?" Evan interjected, a quiver of fear in his voice. "What happens then?" Claire turned her head to him, locking eyes. "We have to make that decision ourselves. The entity, it's offering us something. But what if it's not just knowledge? What if it's a test? Or a trap?" Evan's face paled, and his voice dropped to a whisper. "What if we're not supposed to be here? What if we're opening a door that shouldn't be opened?" There was a long silence, the weight of Evan's words sinking in like a stone thrown into still water. Claire knew the stakes were high. They were standing on the edge of discovery, but they were also standing on the edge of the unknown, and that was more dangerous than anything they had ever faced. She felt a wave of doubt wash over her. Could they truly comprehend what they were being offered? Was humanity ready for what lay beyond? Or was there something more sinister at play, something that could unravel everything they thought they knew? "Let's not rush into anything," Claire said, her voice softer now, but filled with resolve. "Sophie, can you keep decoding the message? We need to understand what it's offering before we make a choice. We can't afford to make a mistake." Sophie nodded, but her expression was distant. "I'll keep working on it. But we have to be careful. These symbols, they're more complex than anything I've ever seen. If we don't decode it right, we might open something we can't control." "We'll take it slow," Claire said, trying to reassure the crew, but she couldn't ignore the growing knot of fear in her stomach. "We move cautiously. We make sure we understand before we take any further steps." The crew settled into a tense silence as Sophie worked, her fingers dancing over the tablet screen, deciphering the patterns. Minutes passed, stretching into what felt like hours. The anticipation hung in the air, suffocating and heavy. Claire's thoughts raced as she tried to anticipate what would come next. Would the entity reveal itself fully? Would they finally understand what it wanted? Then, suddenly, Sophie's voice broke the silence again. "I think I've got it," she said, her voice steady but tinged with awe. "The message is, it's more than just a simple invitation or warning. It's a call. A challenge. It's asking us to make a choice." Claire's heart skipped a beat. A choice? What kind of choice? Sophie's eyes met Claire's, and she could see the same fear in her face that had been building in her own chest. "It's asking us to choose between two paths. One path will grant us access to everything, the knowledge, the power, the technology, everything this entity knows. The other, well, it's harder to interpret, but it seems like it could lead to something catastrophic. Something dangerous." Claire's mind spun as she tried to process Sophie's words. "So, we choose between life-changing knowledge and, what? Destruction?" Sophie nodded slowly. "That's what it seems like. But it's not as clear-cut as it sounds. The path to knowledge isn't a guarantee. It's possible that accepting the knowledge could change us in ways we can't even imagine. We could lose ourselves in it, or worse." Marcus looked at Sophie, his eyes narrowing. "And the other path? What's that one?" Sophie hesitated, then said softly, "It's not entirely clear. But the symbols suggest that it's a path that could lead to the destruction of not just us, but the entire ship, maybe even everything we've ever known. It's a risk. A very dangerous one." The room went still. Every person aboard the ship felt the weight of what Sophie had just said. They were standing at the crossroads of humanity's future. One path could grant them unimaginable power, the other could spell their end. Claire's mind raced. The decision before them was monumental, and she knew there was no going back once they chose. But which path was the right one? Could they trust the entity? Could they even trust themselves? "We need to decide," Claire said, her voice low, yet resolute. "But we need to make this decision together. Everyone has a say. We can't move forward without fully understanding the consequences." For the first time since the encounter began, the crew gathered together, each person lost in their own thoughts. But one thing was clear, they would all have to decide. The choice would shape not just their fate, but the fate of humanity. The silence in the ship was deafening as each member of the crew pondered the words Sophie had just spoken. They had come all this way, braving the unknown, pushing the limits of human exploration. But now, standing at the precipice of an unimaginable choice, the weight of their responsibility was crushing. Claire sat in the command seat, her fingers gripping the edges tightly, her knuckles white. Her mind was spinning, each option swirling like a storm in her head. The first path, unveiling the knowledge of the entity. The power it offered could revolutionize humanity, unlock secrets of the universe, and maybe even extend life itself. But the dangers were clear. Sophie had warned them. The knowledge could change them in ways they couldn't comprehend. It could corrupt them, twist them, or make them something else entirely. The second path was far more nebulous. Destruction. An ending, not just for them, but potentially for everything they had worked for. Everything humanity had strived to build. The weight of that possibility gnawed at Claire's resolve. Was it worth the risk? Could they afford to take that chance? "You're all thinking it," Evan's voice broke through the thick silence. His voice was quiet but firm. "This is insane. How are we supposed to decide something like this?" "I don't know," Claire said, her voice low. "But we have to. We can't just leave. We're already here. If we don't make the choice, we risk everything." Evan's face twisted in frustration, his hands clenched into fists. "It feels wrong. We're talking about risking humanity's future for some, what? Power? Technology? I don't trust this thing, Claire." Claire took a deep breath, trying to steady herself. "Neither do I, Evan. But the only way forward is through. We're already on the edge of the abyss. We have to make this decision based on what we believe is best for us, and for the future." Sophie, who had been unusually quiet since her revelation, finally spoke up. Her voice was trembling slightly, but there was determination there too. "I'm not going to lie. I'm scared. I don't know what the future holds if we take the knowledge path. But I do know that we've never had an opportunity like this before. Imagine the breakthroughs we could make. We could solve the energy crisis, end hunger, maybe even cure diseases that have plagued humanity for centuries. But we're not guaranteed success. We're not even sure if we can control what's being offered to us." She paused, and the weight of her words hung heavy in the air. "And the other path," she continued, "it might be safer, but at what cost? It could be a trap. We could be abandoning the potential for something unimaginable. Something that could change everything for the better, or destroy it all." Claire looked at the rest of the crew, each one deep in thought. Marcus, the quiet one, finally broke the tension. "I'm not sure which path is right, but I think we're forgetting something important," he said, his voice calm but forceful. "This isn't just about what we want. It's about what humanity is ready for. We're standing at a turning point in history. If we make the wrong choice, we might not just be condemning ourselves. We could be condemning everyone. Evan looked up, his eyes narrowing in thought. So what do we do? Just decide to play God. This isn't a decision we can make lightly. Claire's eyes met his. I'm not trying to play God. I'm trying to survive. We can't ignore what's in front of us. Whatever happens, we need to move forward. The weight of her words hung in the air, and for a moment, Claire wasn't sure what to do. The responsibility of their next move pressed down on her like 1,000 tons. Every part of her screamed to retreat, to turn back before it was too late. But that wasn't an option anymore. They had come too far. Okay, she said after a long pause, her voice steady despite the fear building inside her. We need to make a decision. We can't hesitate any longer. We can't wait for a sign from the universe. We have to choose, and we have to be willing to live with the consequences. Sophie nodded, her fingers shaking as she typed a series of commands into the tablet. I'll begin the final sequence. We can't go back now, not once we initiate it. Claire turned her attention back to the screen, the word knowledge still flashing in front of them. She took a deep breath, steadying her nerves. Her heart pounded in her chest. There was no more time for doubts. Initiate it, Claire said, her voice low but resolute. Sophie hesitated for just a moment, but then her fingers danced across the controls, activating the sequence. The ship hummed again, the vibrations building steadily as the entity's influence spread deeper into their systems. The symbols began to shift once more, growing more complex, more intricate. Each change brought a deeper understanding, a greater sense of connection to whatever force lay beyond their comprehension. Then, as the final sequence completed, the ship lurched forward, the entire structure shaking violently. The sudden shift sent Claire stumbling from her seat, barely able to catch herself as the ship rocked back and forth. The crew was thrown into disarray, scrambling to stay steady, as the walls of the ship seemed to bend with the intensity of the vibrations. Claire's heart was in her throat as the lights flickered and died once again, leaving them in complete darkness. For a moment, the silence was absolute, and then, the hum returned, stronger than ever, and filled with an eerie resonance. Hold on! Claire shouted over the roar of the ship's systems as the ship hurtled toward the unknown. She had no idea what was about to happen, but there was no turning back now. The ship's violent shaking seemed to stretch on forever, each second felt like an eternity as the walls groaned and the systems rumbled. Claire clutched the armrests of her seat, her knuckles white, her mind racing. Every fiber of her being screamed for them to stop, to retreat, but there was no retreating now. The path had been chosen, and they were already too deep into it. Is everyone all right? Claire shouted into the chaos, her voice hoarse. The flashing lights illuminated their faces in brief, jerky moments, casting eerie shadows across the room. I think I'm okay. Sophie's voice cracked through the noise, and Claire could hear her breathing heavily, trying to regain control of her emotions. But we're losing power to some of the systems. The main engine is going haywire. We need to stabilize it Before she could finish, the ship lurched again, and this time, the entire vessel shuddered with a force that threw them all to the ground. Claire's body slammed hard against the floor, and her head struck the cold metal with a sickening thud. For a moment, the world went black. When Claire regained consciousness, her head was throbbing, and the world around her was spinning. She blinked rapidly, trying to clear her vision, and slowly, she pushed herself up, only to find herself surrounded by an eerie silence. The crew was scattered across the deck, groaning in pain, slowly coming to their senses. The lights were dim, flickering erratically, casting strange shadows on the walls. Everyone, get up! Claire yelled, her voice hoarse but demanding. We need to get to the bridge, now. Whatever's happening, we need to fix it, or we'll lose everything. Slowly, the crew began to stir. Evan was the first to rise, his face pale, but his eyes sharp with determination. What the hell just happened? Did we hit something? No, we're still moving, Sophie answered, her voice shaky but steadying. Something's wrong with the ship's systems. We're losing power, and I don't know why. We don't have time to waste. Claire snapped, urgency rising in her chest. Get to the bridge now. I'll meet you there. She scrambled to her feet and made her way down the narrow corridors of the ship, her heart pounding in her chest. Every step she took was filled with a strange sense of dread. She didn't know where the ship was headed, or what they had just unleashed. All she knew was that they had activated something beyond their understanding, and now, they were paying the price. By the time Claire reached the bridge, the crew was already at their stations, each of them desperately trying to get a handle on the chaotic systems. Sophie was working furiously at her console, her fingers flying across the keyboard. Evan and Marcus were focused on the navigation systems, but their faces were filled with worry. We're entering some kind of field, Sophie muttered as she glanced at the readouts. I can't pinpoint it. It's like we're moving through a fog, and nothing we're doing is stopping it. We're losing all our communications with the outside world. The ship is essentially blind. Can we get a visual? Claire asked, her voice strained as she watched the screens flicker. Anything? Sophie hesitated, clearly struggling to override the failing systems. I'll try, but it's not looking good. Suddenly, the ship jerked forward again, and Claire had to brace herself against the console to avoid falling. The lights flickered wildly, casting brief glimpses of something outside. For a split second, Claire thought she saw a vast expanse of stars. No, it wasn't stars. It was something else. Something massive, and yet distant, like a field of energy, like waves. Sophie, what's happening? Evan shouted, panic creeping into his voice. Sophie's face was pale, her eyes wide as she stared at the monitors. We're not just in space anymore. We've crossed over into something else, something outside the known dimensions. It's like the fabric of space is shifting. We might be in another layer of reality. The words hit Claire like a blow to the chest. Another layer of reality? Was this what the entity had been trying to show them? Was this the knowledge they'd unleashed? The ship was in freefall, heading into the unknown, and there was no telling where it would land. Get us out of this. Claire barked, unable to hide the desperation in her voice. We need to stabilize the ship before it's too late. I'm trying. Sophie cried, her hands moving frantically over the console. I can't make any sense of the data. It's like everything is changing. The systems are being rewritten, but we can't control it. Marcus, who had been quiet up until now, spoke in a low, steady voice. What if this is what we were meant to find? Maybe this is it, the thing the entity wanted us to discover. The path we've chosen, it's leading us somewhere beyond the physical world, somewhere no one's ever been before. Claire's heart raced. Could this really be what they were meant to discover? The thought of venturing into a completely unknown and uncharted reality sent a chill through her. She wasn't sure if she was ready for it. None of them were. Suddenly, the ship's systems cut out entirely, and the bridge was plunged into darkness. The low hum of the ship's engine ceased, leaving only the distant echo of metal creaking. Claire's heart skipped a beat as the quiet swallowed them whole. It was as though the ship had ceased to exist, leaving them stranded in the vast, empty void. We're dead in the water, Sophie said, her voice barely above a whisper. We're not going anywhere unless we figure out how to navigate this. The words hung in the air like a death sentence. Claire's pulse quickened. They were trapped. But then, something strange happened. A soft glow appeared in the distance, far beyond the reach of the ship's viewport. At first, it seemed like a distant star, but as they watched, it grew brighter, expanding like a nova. The light enveloped the ship, and Claire felt an odd sensation, as though time itself had slowed down. The ship seemed to pulse with the rhythm of the light, as though it were becoming part of the very energy they were encountering. Sophie's voice trembled as she whispered, "I think it's trying to communicate with us. The entity, it's here. It's been here all along." Claire stared into the expanding light, her breath caught in her throat. This was it, the moment they had all been waiting for. And yet, the closer they got to understanding, the farther away they seemed to drift from the safety of the familiar world. The light enveloped the ship, growing brighter and more intense with each passing moment. Claire felt a strange weightlessness in her chest, as if the ship had crossed some invisible threshold into a realm she could neither understand nor escape from. The glow outside was no longer just a distant star, it was an all-consuming presence, swirling and pulsing with a rhythm that echoed deep within her bones. "Everyone, stay calm," Claire commanded, though her own voice trembled as she spoke. "We don't know what this is, but we can't let fear control us now." But it was hard not to feel afraid. They were no longer in the vast, cold vacuum of space. They had crossed into something else, something so alien that even the most seasoned explorers would have been hard-pressed to make sense of it. The ship's systems had gone completely dark, and for a moment, there was only silence, the kind that settled in your bones. Sophie was still working furiously at the control panel, trying to make sense of the data. But every attempt seemed to be swallowed by the void, the readings changing too rapidly, too erratically for her to keep up. I can't make sense of it," Sophie shouted, her frustration palpable. "Every time I try to establish a connection with the ship's systems, the readings shift again. It's like we're moving through something, but it doesn't follow any known laws of physics. We're trapped in a field of energy, and I have no idea how to get us out." "We don't need to leave yet," Marcus interjected, his voice calm but resolute. He was still gazing at the light outside, a look of awe on his face. "Maybe this is what we were meant to find. We've uncovered something beyond our comprehension." "I agree," Evan added, his eyes locked on the window. "What if this is the entity? What if it's been waiting for us to reach this point, to cross this line? This could be the breakthrough we've been searching for, a glimpse into a new dimension of existence." Claire felt a sense of dread creeping up her spine. But at what cost? We don't know what this thing wants from us. We don't know what's going to happen if we get too close. Suddenly, a deep, resonant hum filled the ship, vibrating through the walls and the deck beneath them. It was not just a sound, it was a presence, like the ship itself was being resonated in tune with something vast and incomprehensible. Claire's heart pounded, and she felt an overwhelming sensation of being drawn toward the light. It was almost magnetic. "Something's happening," Sophie said, her voice trembling with awe. "I think the entity is communicating with us. The light, it's not just an energy field, it's a sentient force. It's aware of us." The words sent a chill through Claire's body. The very idea that they were not just exploring an unknown force but interacting with an intelligent being was beyond anything they had ever imagined. They had crossed the line between exploration and encounter. The entity, the one that had guided them here, was alive. And it had been waiting for them. As the ship continued to vibrate, a new set of symbols appeared on the viewport. They were unlike anything Claire had ever seen. They were fluid, constantly shifting, and yet there was an undeniable pattern to them. Sophie stared at the symbols, her eyes wide with realization. "I can understand them," she whispered. "It's like they're speaking to me. The symbols, they're teaching me something." "Teaching you?" Evan asked, his voice rising with concern. "What are you talking about, Sophie?" "It's not just words," Sophie replied, her voice distant. "It's knowledge. It's showing me things about the universe, about life. It's giving me the answers to everything. The energy field, the ship, the way we've been moving through space, it's all part of a greater design. And the entity, it's been guiding us here, showing us the way." Claire felt a wave of dizziness wash over her as Sophie's words sank in. What are you saying? The entity, it's been leading us this whole time. But why? What does it want from us? Sophie hesitated, her hands trembling over the controls. I don't know yet. But I think we're on the edge of discovering something that could change everything. This entity, it's been existing outside our understanding of time and space. It doesn't follow the same rules we do. It's not bound by the limitations of our reality. The ship lurched again, and this time, the hum of the energy field intensified, reverberating through the very core of the vessel. Claire's vision blurred as the room spun. She gripped the nearest console, trying to steady herself. The light outside shifted, swirling in a magnificent display of color and energy. The symbols on the viewport grew brighter, and for a moment, Claire thought she saw something within the glow, a shape, a figure. It was vague at first, but then it became clearer, a humanoid form, impossibly tall, its outline shimmering like a reflection on water. The figure seemed to be reaching toward them, its hands stretching out as if inviting them to come closer. I don't like this, Evan muttered, his voice strained with fear. We don't know what that thing is. We don't know if it's friendly or hostile. We don't have a choice, Claire said, her voice low but filled with determination. We've come this far. We've made our decision. Now we need to find out what it really wants. Suddenly, the figure in the light spoke, but not with words. It communicated directly with them, sending a wave of understanding through their minds, bypassing language altogether. It was as if the entity was inside their heads, sharing its thoughts, its knowledge, its very essence. You have come far, it thought to them. But you are only at the beginning. The knowledge you seek is within your reach. But there are consequences for all things. Are you ready to accept them? The question hit Claire like a bolt of lightning. Was she ready? Was any of them ready for what this being had to offer? And what consequences would follow? Before she could respond, the light flared again, and the ship seemed to pass through a threshold, leaving behind the strange dimension they had entered. The familiar stars of space returned, distant and cold. They were back. But everything had changed. The entity was still with them, and the ship was no longer the same. The familiar sight of distant stars filled the viewport, but the serenity of the cosmic scene felt out of place. The ship had just crossed through something incomprehensible, an unknown field of energy, a rift in reality itself, and emerged back into the vast emptiness of space. But despite the quiet, despite the stars that twinkled outside, Claire knew they were no longer the same. The entity's presence was still with them, lingering in the very air of the ship, its consciousness now woven into their minds. They had felt it, each of them, deep within their thoughts, a voice, not spoken aloud but understood through raw, unfiltered sensation. You have reached the threshold. But the journey does not end here. Claire had no words for what had just happened. No way to express the overwhelming mix of awe, fear, and excitement that was coursing through her veins. The entity had shown them something far greater than they could have imagined. It had unlocked a door to knowledge, to a truth that transcended human understanding. And now, they stood on the precipice, poised to make a decision that could change the course of their lives, and possibly humanity's future, forever. What the hell just happened? Evan finally muttered, his voice shaky but his eyes wide with disbelief. We went through it. We passed through that thing. But, it didn't destroy us. It didn't. It didn't kill us, Sophie finished for him, her face pale but thoughtful. It did something else. It's like it awakened something in us. I can feel it. This connection to the entity. To the knowledge it gave us. Marcus was the first to speak up, his voice steady but heavy with the weight of what they had all just experienced. It wasn't just knowledge. It was power. It showed us how to manipulate space, time, and reality itself. We can change things, everything. The implications of his words hung in the air, making Claire's stomach twist with uncertainty. Power, that was what the entity had shared with them. But at what cost? What was the price for unlocking such a force? Was humanity ready for it? Were they ready for it? Claire's thoughts were interrupted by the hum of the ship's systems, which had come back online, though they were still fragile, flickering in and out of stability. Sophie immediately rushed to her station, fingers flying over the controls as she tried to stabilize the ship's power. "I think we've stabilized the ship," Sophie said, her voice tight with focus. "But the real question is, what do we do now? What happens next?" Claire's mind raced. They had discovered the entity, they had touched something beyond human comprehension, and now they had to make a choice. A choice that would determine not only their fates but the fate of everyone they knew, and perhaps the entire world. "Do we try to learn more?" Claire asked, her voice low and contemplative. "Do we dig deeper into this power, into this knowledge? Or do we leave it behind? Cut our losses and return to Earth, to everything we know? Leave it behind?" Evan scoffed, looking incredulous. "We've already crossed the line. We can't go back now. Not after everything we've seen. We have the power to change everything, to shape the future. But do we understand it?" Sophie shot back. "What if we unlock something we can't control? What if the entity gave us this knowledge to test us, to see if we can handle it? Maybe we're not meant to wield this power. Maybe the cost is too great." Marcus nodded slowly, his expression pensive. "It's like a double-edged sword. If we move forward, we could unlock the potential for humanity to evolve, to break free from the limits of time and space. But if we misuse it, we could destroy everything." Claire felt a knot tighten in her chest. The weight of the decision was suffocating. They had been given a glimpse of something extraordinary, something that could revolutionize everything. But they were also teetering on the edge of an abyss. One wrong move, one misstep, and it could all come crashing down. "What if we try to communicate with the entity again?" Sophie suggested cautiously. "Maybe it can guide us, give us a clearer understanding of what it really wants from us." Claire considered this for a long moment. The entity had already shown them so much, shared its secrets and its power. Perhaps it wasn't just a force to be feared, but one that could help them understand the path forward. "All right," Claire said, taking a deep breath, her voice resolute. "Let's try. But we need to approach this carefully. We can't rush into this blindly. If we're going to move forward, we need to know exactly what we're dealing with." Sophie nodded and turned back to the console. She began to input a series of commands, sending a signal out into the void, hoping for a response from the entity. The crew watched in tense silence as the ship hummed and vibrated slightly under their feet, the atmosphere thick with anticipation. Moments passed before anything happened. But then, the viewport flickered, and once again, the light appeared. Not as bright and all-encompassing as before, but still unmistakable, still pulsing with life. The symbols on the screen began to form, shifting and changing as they had before, but this time, they seemed to spell out something more tangible. A message. "You have seen the edge. Do you wish to cross it?" The words echoed in their minds, and Claire's heart skipped a beat. This was it, the moment of truth. The entity was asking them if they were ready to continue, to embrace the unknown, to take that final step into a future no one could predict. "Do we cross the line?" Claire asked quietly, more to herself than anyone else. "Do we embrace the unknown, or do we walk away?" The crew stood in silence, each of them wrestling with their own fears, doubts, and desires. Sophie, Evan, Marcus, Claire, they had all come so far, but now they were faced with a decision that could change everything. After a long pause, Evan stepped forward. "We've already crossed the line," he said firmly, his voice full of conviction. "There's no going back. We can either walk away, or we can accept the challenge and see where it leads us." Claire took a deep breath, her mind clear, her resolve hardening. "Then we move forward. Together. As the crew exchanged uncertain but determined glances, the ship vibrated once more, and the entity's presence seemed to swell within them. They had made their choice. The journey was far from over. The true adventure, the true test, was just beginning. Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. The crew has made their choice, and the entity's true nature is about to unfold. Will they discover the answers they seek, or will they become pawns in a far greater game? The final chapter is upon them. Stay tuned for the epic conclusion.